At first it seemed like just another interview, but then Perry Stone dropped words that left the room frozen. His revelation about Joni Lamb wasn't just surprising, it was explosive, pulling back the curtain on secrets no one expected to hear. Fans were stunned, critics scrambled, and whispers quickly turned into headlines. What Perry exposed has people questioning everything they thought they knew. Could this be the shock that changes it all? When Perry Stone went live that evening, no one expected what would come out of his mouth. For years, viewers had tuned in to hear his prophetic words, the kind of messages that made people feel like they were glimpsing the future. But instead of hope or encouragement, his tone was different this time. Steady, almost heavy. With thousands watching, he said the name no one thought he would, Joni Lamb. In that instant, everything shifted. What should have been another routine stream suddenly felt like the start of an earthquake. As his words were not shouted or sensational, that was what made them hit harder. Calmly, almost like a man carrying a burden for too long, Stone spoke about how Joni's leadership at Daystar had crossed into something darker. He didn't describe her as simply managing the network or guiding programming choices. He described it as control. Influence that went far beyond scheduling shows or choosing guests. He painted a picture of someone using power to bend not just television, but the entire prophetic voice of the church. The confession grew heavier as he admitted he himself had felt the weight of that influence. He spoke of times when financial support came with strings attached, when unspoken expectations shaped what he preached. His voice cracked as he said, "It wasn't just about media. It was about someone else's vision shaping God's message." "I can't stay quiet anymore," he told the viewers. And in that moment, silence that had lasted for years was shattered. Almost instantly, clips of the live stream spread across TikTok and YouTube. Viewers flooded the comments, pastors shared the footage, and bloggers wrote posts within hours. Supporters hailed Stone as brave, finally saying out loud what many had whispered behind closed doors. Critics accused him of causing unnecessary division, but whether people agreed with him or not, they couldn't ignore it. For the first time, the whispers about Joni Lamb's role at Daystar weren't just gossip. They had a face and a voice attached to them. It was a bombshell, not because Stone screamed it into the mic, but because of the weight behind his quiet delivery. The ripple effect was immediate, and it spread like fire through the faith community. That night, one man's choice to speak pulled the curtain back on one of Christian broadcasting's most powerful figures. And whether people believed every word or not, the storm had already begun, and there was no turning back. At first, Perry Stone's words seemed like they would be a one-day headline, something people argued about online, then forgot as the news cycle moved on. But that isn't what happened. Instead, his calm confession about Joni Lamb's influence turned into a spark that lit a much bigger fire. Almost overnight, whispers that had floated quietly for years began to turn into open allegations. What had once been private rumors suddenly had space to grow in public, and once they started, there was no stopping them. Former employees of Daystar began posting vague comments online. They didn't come forward with documents or official statements at first, but they hinted at stories of pressure, manipulation, and backroom deals. Some wrote about the unspoken rules of working under Joni's leadership, how loyalty mattered more than anything, how speaking out was dangerous, and how stepping out of line could quietly end a career. These posts didn't give details, but they carried the tone of people who had seen things and were tired of staying quiet. Soon, ministers who had once partnered with Daystar began adding their voices. A few admitted that they too had felt subtle pressure when working with the network. They spoke of how airtime seemed connected to how closely they aligned with the direction Joni wanted. One even suggested that certain preachers were favored because they preached prosperity messages that encouraged giving, which lined up with the network's financial goals. Another claimed that when he refused to alter his message, his programs were suddenly cut without explanation. These weren't just random voices on social media. These were men and women who had been on Daystar's platform, people who had worked directly with the network. Their credibility gave the whispers a new kind of weight, and as their stories started to connect, a pattern began to take shape. What made it worse for Joni was the consistency. Even though each story came from a different person, the themes were strikingly similar. Influence tied to money, expectations hidden behind offers of support, a culture where loyalty was rewarded and questioning the system was punished. None of this was written down or official, but the more people spoke up, the more believable it became. Social media amplified everything. Videos started circulating with former staff and ministers sharing their experiences in more detail. Bloggers wrote long posts pulling together old suspicions with these new voices. Clips from Perry Stone's livestream were paired with fresh testimonies to create timelines of events. The whispers had officially become allegations, and the online world was treating them as evidence. Even more damaging were the rumors that Joni had used her influence not only to promote her allies, but to silence critics. Some claimed that whistleblowers were quietly pushed out or pressured into signing agreements that kept them from speaking publicly. A few suggested that settlements had been made to bury damaging stories. None of this was proven, but in the public's eyes, the very fact that people were willing to say it openly now gave it traction. Daystar's polished image started to crack. For years, viewers had seen Joni as a warm, trustworthy figure, the woman who sat in their living rooms through a television screen and spoke about faith, family, and hope. To hear that behind that image, she might have been pulling strings and controlling messages for her own purposes, felt like betrayal. Many longtime supporters felt blindsided. They had trusted her for years, and now they were wondering if what they heard on Daystar was really ministry or something crafted to fit an agenda. Every day, more voices seemed to join in. Some were careful, offering vague hints rather than clear accusations, but others came forward more boldly. A few even said they had seen ministers pressured to avoid controversial topics unless those topics helped boost ratings or donations. Others pointed out that certain voices were elevated, while others seemed to mysteriously disappear from the network. To viewers on the outside, it suddenly looked like there might have been an entire system in place that no one had noticed before. The silence from Joni only added to the storm. If she had come out quickly with a strong denial, perhaps she could have slowed the momentum, but by saying nothing, she gave space for the allegations to grow unchecked. Every day she stayed quiet. People took it as a sign that maybe Perry Stone and these new voices were telling the truth. Silence became its own form of evidence, and that evidence was damning. As the allegations piled up, the story was no longer just about Perry Stone's livestream. It was about the bigger picture of power, money, and influence in Christian broadcasting. People began asking hard questions. How much of what they saw on television was authentic faith? How much was shaped by hidden deals and private expectations? Daystar, once a symbol of trust, was suddenly at the center of a growing crisis of credibility. By the end of the first week, the whispers had completely transformed. What had once been gossip behind closed doors was now a full-blown public discussion. Allegations of manipulation, financial pressure, and silencing critics were spreading across every platform. The tide had turned, and Joni Lamb's once untouchable reputation was now on trial in the court of public opinion. And that was the real power of Perry Stone's words. He hadn't just exposed one leader, he had opened a door that others quickly walked through, and once those whispers became allegations, there was no putting them back in the shadows. The backlash didn't happen slowly. It came like a tidal wave. The moment Perry Stone's words left his mouth, trust that had taken decades to build began to unravel in days. For years, viewers had welcomed Joni Lamb into their homes, trusted her voice, and believed the stories she told on Daystar. Many had grown up with the network as part of their lives, a constant source of spiritual encouragement. Now that trust was shattered, the shift was almost painful to watch. People who once defended her were suddenly questioning everything. At first, the reaction online was divided. Some viewers jumped to Joni's defense, saying Perry Stone must have been mistaken or exaggerating. They couldn't believe that the woman they had trusted for so long could really be guilty of manipulation or control. But as the hours passed, more and more stories surfaced. Former staff members hinted at strange decisions and unspoken rules. Pastors spoke quietly about the pressure they felt when dealing with Daystar. The internet, relentless in its hunger, pulled these fragments together until they began to look like a pattern. Suddenly, those who defended Joni felt outnumbered. What made the backlash sting even more was how personal it felt. This wasn't just about a scandal in Christian media. For many viewers, it felt like betrayal by a close friend. People had donated money, prayed for the network, and believed in its mission. To now hear that behind the polished broadcasts, there might have been manipulation, deals, and hidden agendas was devastating. Social media filled with posts from people saying they felt tricked, that their faith had been used for someone else's control. Some even posted old donation receipts, expressing shame and regret for giving. Church communities began to feel the ripple effects. Conversations about the scandal popped up in prayer groups, Bible studies, and even Sunday sermons. Pastors were put in difficult positions as congregants asked whether it was still right to support Daystar, or whether donations had been used honestly. Some leaders tried to stay neutral, saying they were praying for truth to come out, but their silence or hesitation often spoke louder than their words. The foundation of trust between the network and the church community was cracking. Joni's continued silence only deepened the problem. If she had come out with a clear statement early on, perhaps she could have slowed the storm. But as the days passed without a response, people began interpreting her silence as guilt. Every hour without an explanation felt like confirmation that Perry Stone and others were telling the truth. Even within Christian leadership circles, her allies became hesitant to defend her. A few pastors who had once been regular guests on Daystar quietly distanced themselves, canceling appearances or offering only vague words of support. For Daystar as a whole, the backlash was more than just a public relations nightmare. It was a collapse of credibility. Ratings reportedly began to slip, with viewers admitting they couldn't watch the same programs without questioning whether the messages were genuine. The trust that held the network together, that invisible bond between broadcaster and audience, was fractured, and once broken, trust is nearly impossible to restore. Donors, once the lifeblood of the network, started to pull back. Questions about finances began to surface, and sponsors grew nervous about being tied to the scandal. What hurt the most for many longtime supporters was how quickly loyalty turned into suspicion. Old clips of Joni speaking on air began to resurface online, dissected for hidden motives or double meanings. Every property she owned, every business decision she made, was suddenly reinterpreted as evidence of manipulation. The same woman who had once been celebrated as a strong Christian leader was now being cast as the face of control and scandal. The contrast was jarring and heartbreaking for those who had trusted her for years. Inside Daystar, the atmosphere reportedly shifted too. Employees who had once been proud to work for the network now felt caught in the middle of a storm. Some were afraid of losing their jobs if the scandal grew worse. Others were frustrated, feeling like their work was being overshadowed by accusations they had no control over. Morale dropped, and whispers inside the office mirrored the ones spreading online. Even those who had defended Joni in private began to wonder how much truth there might be in what was being said. The backlash also reached beyond Joni and Daystar. It raised broader questions about Christian media as a whole. People began to ask how many other networks might operate in the same way, using influence and money to shape messages. The scandal became a symbol of everything critics had long suspected about televangelism: that it was as much about business and control as it was about ministry. The broken trust spread wider than just one network. It cast a shadow over the entire industry. And perhaps that was the greatest damage of all. When one leader falls, the ripple touches everyone. Ministries that had nothing to do with Daystar suddenly found themselves facing questions from donors and congregants. The credibility of Christian television itself was under fire. What had once been seen as a lifeline for millions now looked to some like a machine designed to manipulate. For Joni, the silence is heavy, and the broken trust may be impossible to repair. Decades of credibility have unraveled in weeks. Viewers who once defended her no longer can. Donors hesitate. Pastors distance themselves. And every day that passes, the backlash grows louder. The trust that made her career, that built Daystar into a global force, is gone. And without trust, the empire she helped create may not survive. The storm that Perry Stone unleashed didn't just shake Joni Lamb's reputation, it shook the very foundation of Daystar itself. For years, the network had stood as one of the strongest names in Christian broadcasting. Families trusted it, pastors partnered with it, and donors poured millions into it because they believed it was a light in the darkness. Now, that light feels dimmer, flickering under the weight of suspicion, unanswered questions, and a backlash that grows louder by the day. What was once seen as untouchable now looks fragile, and the future of Daystar feels more uncertain than ever. Inside the walls of Daystar's headquarters, the atmosphere has changed. Staff who once walked with pride now move cautiously, whispering in hallways, uncertain what tomorrow will bring. The energy that used to buzz through the building, plans for new shows, partnerships, events, has been replaced by tension. Employees wonder if they should start looking for new jobs. Some quietly update their resumes, while others cling to the hope that things might turn around. But deep down, many sense that the network is standing on shaky ground, and no one knows if it can truly survive this scandal. The financial side of things is even more troubling. Daystar, like most networks of its kind, relies heavily on donations. Viewers give because they believe in the mission, because they trust that their money is being used to spread the gospel, support ministries, and reach people in need. But now, that trust is fractured. Many longtime supporters are pulling back, admitting online that they no longer feel comfortable donating. Some openly say they feel betrayed, that their money may have been used for power plays instead of ministry. A few even posted old receipts, apologizing to friends and family for ever encouraging them to give. Each dollar lost isn't just a number. It's a sign that confidence is slipping away. Sponsors, too, are nervous. Christian businesses that once proudly partnered with Daystar don't want their names tied to controversy. Ministries that paid to air their programs are quietly pulling away, choosing smaller networks or even online platforms where they don't have to worry about being caught in the middle of a scandal. Every contract canceled, every ad withdrawn, is another crack in Daystar's foundation. For the first time in its history, the empire looks vulnerable, not because of outside competition, but because of its own internal storm. But perhaps the greatest danger isn't money, it's perception. In the world of Christian broadcasting, perception is everything. People need to believe that the voices on their screens are genuine, that the messages they hear are guided by faith, not by hidden agendas. The accusations against Joni Lamb have created a shadow of doubt that touches everything the network produces. Even if a sermon is heartfelt and true, viewers are now asking themselves, is this really ministry, or is it just another carefully shaped message designed to benefit someone in power? That kind of doubt spreads fast, and once it takes root, it's almost impossible to uproot. The silence from Joni Lamb herself has only made the future shakier. Every day that she refuses to respond directly adds weight to the suspicion. Some insiders believe she is preparing a statement or strategy, but others think her silence is a sign she might be preparing to step aside altogether. The board is reportedly divided. Some feel that cutting ties with Joni is the only way to save the network's reputation, even if it feels like betrayal to remove the woman who co-founded it with her late husband. Others argue that pushing her out would destroy the heart of Daystar completely, that without her leadership, the empire would collapse faster. The internal battle is just as fierce as the one being fought in the public eye. Meanwhile, the larger landscape of Christian media is changing. Even before this scandal, traditional networks were losing ground to online platforms. YouTube, TikTok, podcasts, and live streams have become the new pulpits, drawing younger audiences who don't watch television at all. Daystar once had a monopoly on Christian broadcasting, but now it faces not just scandal, but irrelevance. In a world where pastors can reach millions from their smartphones, a network weighed down by controversy feels outdated and slow. The scandal didn't just damage Daystar's reputation, it sped up a process that was already underway. For Joni personally, the future looks even more complicated. Her silence might buy her time, but it also isolates her. Each day that passes without a clear explanation makes her look more guilty in the eyes of viewers. Her allies are shrinking. Pastors who once appeared on Daystar now avoid mentioning her name. Leaders who once praised her are staying quiet. The platform she spent her life building has become a cage, and the world is waiting to see if she will defend herself, step aside, or simply watch as the empire crumbles around her. And yet, there's still a chance, however small, that Daystar could survive. The network has weathered storms before, from financial controversies to leadership changes. It still has loyal supporters who believe in its mission, who are waiting for answers and holding out hope that things can be fixed. But fixing this will require more than polished words or public statements. It will require honesty, transparency, and probably a complete restructuring of leadership. Without that, Daystar's future will remain shaky, built on a foundation of suspicion instead of trust. What makes this moment so heartbreaking is how quickly everything has unraveled. For decades, Daystar was a household name in Christian homes. People trusted it, defended it, gave to it, and believed in it. It represented stability in an unstable world. Now, that same network looks like it could collapse at any moment, not because of outside enemies, but because of broken trust. In the court of public opinion, trust once lost is rarely rebuilt. And that may be the final tragedy of this storm, that even if Daystar survives, it will never again be what it once was. The shaken future of Daystar is more than just the story of one woman or one network. It's a warning. It shows how fragile trust is, how quickly power can crumble when people feel betrayed, and how even the most respected ministries can fall if their foundations are built on control instead of faith. Whether Daystar survives or not, the golden age of the network is over. What comes next will be something smaller, quieter, and forever shadowed by the scandal that brought it to its knees.